Hi kids, this is Tom Peterson, aka Uncle Tom from Uncle Tom's Kitchen. Well, we're doing another show. As you remember, last month we did a show on Habitat Humanity for the volunteer series that we're doing, Volunteers of Racine. Now, because of that, we found another person. As you can remember, Harold Solberg is a person that, there goes a squirrel, is a person that actually started the Habitat Restore, him and his wife, Lois, in Racine. And I found out that he's a bowl maker. He makes bowls out of wood, and what an artist he is. Beautiful work. We're going to see a little bit of his work. Now, the work that he's going to be doing in this show is with a bush or a tree that is called the buckthorn. Now, the buckthorn tree, unlike this one, is an invasive tree. It means that it grows like crazy. It's going to take a tree like this, and it's going to surround its beautiful big roots. And this tree probably is 150 to 200 years old, and it's going to kill this tree. Not only does it kill this tree, but it's going to kill birds that are flying around here, squirrels that are climbing around on the fence, and our plants. It's going to kill our plants too. This bush, this tree is so invasive, it's destroying our woods and our forests in the whole Midwest. Not only that, it grows in our yard. This is a buckthorn bush. This bush has been growing here ever since my kids were little. We told them when they were little not to eat the berries that comes on this bush because they're poisonous. Good thing we did, because they really are. They will kill anything that eats these berries, including the animals, because these berries will stay on this bush. The leaves will stay on the bush sometimes for the whole winter. And what happens is the birds come, the squirrels come, they start gathering them, they start eating them. But not only that, it kills big old trees like this, trees that we want to have around. So take a look at this once. Doesn't look like it's much of a killer, does it? But it is. The roots on this thing are like a great big ball, and they surround the roots of this tree. So we're going to meet a couple of people who are like what I would call the Johnny Appleseeds in reverse. Dick Ehrlert is going to be one of them, and his partner, Bernie Man. Not Burning Man, but Bernie Man. And they are taking upon themselves as a volunteer to go out into the parks with permits and start cutting down these trees, these buckthorn trees, because they know how much of a hazard they are to the woods that we have. We are going to be going in just a minute. Dory and I are going to go and jump in the jalopy, and we're going to head over to Dick's house, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the history of the buckthorn plant, and then Dick's going to take us over to Pritchard Park where they've been working. And it's a pretty interesting thing, because I was just over there the other day just to see what they are doing, and just the two of these guys in a matter of 3 or 4 years cleaned out the whole section of that park from all those buckthorn trees. So we're going to see what it looks like now, and well, I'll tell you what, let's just jump in the jalopy. Hey Dory, come on, let's jump in the jalopy and head on over there. We're going to go over to Dick's house right now, so we'll catch you over there.
But buckthorn is really a big problem, and a lot of people have heard about it, but they're not exactly sure what it is. It's literally taking over our woods and our forests and our parks and that, and it's a Eurasian plant that came to the United States in the 1800s, and I think it was sold as an ornamental. A lot of people bought them because they grew well, they had nice dark leaves, and you still see some in people's front yards. To describe the tree a little bit, there's a male and a female tree, and the female has the berries. And there's two kinds of buckthorn in this area, common and glossy. And the common, or the European one, is one that you'll see in most of the parks. It has leaves that are kind of oval-shaped, egg-shaped, and they have sickle-shaped veins in them, and they have a little sawtooth edge on them too. And the reason they call it buckthorn, usually on the end of every twig or whatever, there's a thorn there. So it's nice when you're working in the woods to have leather gloves or whatever too. But the female trees are the ones that probably cause the problem, because both male and female flower out in April or May, and then the female has berries. And the common one, they both start with green berries, and the common then turns to dark purple or black berries, and just thousands of berries on a tree. And they're pretty much red right under a tree. And when we look in the park, I'll show you some areas where there were some female trees, and there are literally thousands of buckthorns growing under the tree. And they're pretty much spread by birds, and they're kind of toxic or diuretic, so the birds and the animals that eat them excrete them, and then they are traveled around. The chipmunks and the little animals and the birds, cedar waxwings and the starlings and the blackbirds and the robins and that, because they keep the berries on in the wintertime, so when birds really get hungry, they get hard up, and it's not the best berry in the world for them.
So they can't digest it?
Well, it goes through their system. It's kind of like a diuretic, or it's almost toxic. And they are poison to humans. We cannot eat the berries, and so they excrete it. I mean, it goes through them. So it's a natural way of seeding it, really. In the winter, they're dropping these things all over in the woods, and they're going to come up then in the spring. The bark is kind of interesting. The younger trees have a horizontal, they're called lenticels, that go around the tree that are horizontal to the ground. And usually when they're smaller, younger, 3-4 years old, the bark is kind of brownish to turning a little bit black. And then as it gets a few years on it, the bark starts to get a little rougher. You can still see there's kind of a horizontal striation around to the ground, and in the center there's the red center. And then as they get older, now this is one we cut out of Pritchard Park, and it's probably 25 or 30 years old, and you can see the center is very red, and this is one that Harold Solberg loves. And we're hoping that maybe more people will find use for. The deer don't seem to eat the little shoots in that. They like the maples and the oaks and the elms and that kind of thing. Harold likes to make bowls out of it because it really looks like cherry wood. And the wood is very good for fireplaces. Quite often as we're cutting wood in the park, people come by and say, could we have some of this? So we'll cut it up and they'll load their truck with it. And actually, Pritchard Park is a county park, so I work through Jim Metzger with the county parks, and after we have so many piles of buckthorn, he'll come in and chip it up or else haul it away and burn it somewhere. That's a problem too. I think sometimes if you chip it up, you got the berries in there, so somebody might make a trail at their house, and lo and behold, they've got buckthorn in their backyard. So that's kind of interesting. But the wood actually looks a little more like a cherry or a plum, so it's sometimes when you're in the woods and you're wanting to cut buckthorn, you have to check the wood first and then check the leaves. Otherwise, if you just check the wood, you might be cutting down a nice cherry tree or something like that too.
When do you think it came over into the United States?
Well, the word is that it came over in the 1800s, and it's from actually Western Asia and Europe. It's a Eurasian type thing, and I think they actually were probably sold in various horticulture type places as an ornamental. I know there's a house down the block from my house that has a nice big one in their front yard. I think it's male, but I guess I don't want to sneak by there with a chainsaw. That wouldn't be the thing to do. But and one of the interesting things too, the buckthorn are one of the first trees to get leaves on in the spring, and they're really the last tree to lose their leaves in the fall. Most trees turn yellow and brown and drop their leaves, but the buckthorn keeps their green color. So after the trees have lost their leaves, if you go by a wooded area, buckthorn really stands out like a sore thumb. It's literally still green. And traditionally, you're supposed to, when we cut the trees down or whatever, we put a herbicide on the stump. That's one of the ways that it doesn't come back. If you cut a buckthorn and don't put any herbicide on it, you literally will have 20 to 30 sprouts coming up. They really proliferate pretty well.
So what do you have to put on them?
Well, I use Roundup, but there are some other products you could probably get at Farm and Fleet or Milligers or one of the places in town. Roundup seems to be the common one. And I know Melissa Warner, who I work with quite often in cutting buckthorn, will color the Roundup. So after you applied it on the stump, you can see that red color there. Otherwise, sometimes you cut a bunch and you forget where you left off, and you don't. One of the best ways really to get rid of it when it's very small and very young, and usually after rain, you can quite often just pull it right out. But I think you might have taken some pictures of the roots. The roots on the buckthorn are very dense. So usually maybe a ½ inch or less of a stem you can kind of pull out if you're pretty good at it. It make you pretty tired after a while.
What do the roots look like once the tree is mature?
Well, they're very dense. You know, it's hard to really know. Some of the big trees we've cut down, we haven't seen the root structure, but the very small ones, the root structure is very big, very dense. And the feeling is that so many of them grow around trees that they really take the moisture, take the nutrients. I've seen some trees in Washington Park, like a hickory nut tree or whatever, that was surrounded by big buckthorns, and the tree literally died in the middle. It seems to overtake the properties of the soil. You know, they just take over. Another fellow, Bernie Mann, and I have been working in Pritchard Park for actually about 3 years now, and we finished the front part of the woods, and now we're working on the back part. And a lot of the trees we're cutting down, we do a chainsaw. We've seen some real big ones. There's one that was, I'll show you when you come in the park, at least a foot in diameter, and a lot of them are 20 to 30 years in growth. And usually they'll grow to 10 to 30 feet high, and they pretty much take over the canopy. They seem to grow in the environment wherever they need the sun. They go straight up, and then they cover other things.
So, can they use it for lumber?
Well,
I mean, if it grows
that's
so straight.
that's the thing we're trying to think. What could it really be used for? You know, you don't want your trees to grow too long because buckthorns get really huge. It would be interesting to see if anyone could come up with some use. You know, I mean, most of the trees are 6 to 8 to 10 inches in diameter, and they grow fairly vertical. So you probably could cut something out of it. I've cut some hearts out of it. I sliced it a little bit, and it's a very, very hard wood. It actually, I think, burns better than oak in like a fireplace or an outdoor fire pit or something.
Has anybody ever tested it to see if the smoke was toxic at all, though?
You know, I don't think so. I doubt that it's toxic. It'd be like any other wood, really. It's it just grows. You know, it has the same structure. When you put herbicide on the stump that you cut off, you like to put I do it with a paintbrush and take the Roundup and just paint it around the edge where the juices go up and down. They say the best time to kill and make sure they don't come back is in the fall when the juices are going down. I've pretty much cut all year long in the winter and the spring and I've used herbicide, and I've gone back to areas, and I find that it seems to work at all times. Technically, they say in the spring the juices are going up into the tree, but it still seems to, I think, it work. But they say middle to late fall is probably the best time to cut these down. I find like after rain is an ideal time. Like back in this little wooded area here, there's a grove back there that's really growing. We cut down a big female tree that dropped all the berries, so there's literally hundreds and thousands of them growing. But okay, there was a big buckthorn tree. In fact, you can see where we cut it off here, this big stump. And it was a female, and it dropped a lot of berries. So now literally there's hundreds of them just growing here. And if we don't get them within 5 years or so, they will take over. You can see back in here, even better. They're just...
Wow. So people would think that those are just actually nice looking bushes.
And no wildflower is going to grow there. You know, if there was a trillium or jack in the pulpit at one time, not anymore.
Oh boy.
So when I have a little time or after a good rain, I'll come in here and just pull 10, 20, 30 of them and get rid of those. Or what I do quite often is, if they're a little bit too big, I just snip them with the clippers and just dab a little dab of Roundup on the thing. Otherwise, again, they'll have 10 coming out where you had one.
Will that kill it, Rick, if you just snip it off a little bit?
Roundup takes care of it.
Okay.
It goes down in there. Some people use a spray. I'll show you when we're in the park. I have a little can and I take a paintbrush and just, work on some of the bigger ones and that. Okay. So you'll see in Pritchard Park. I'll show you a real example of this that'll blow your photograph back. You see these now. These are only a couple years old. They're going to take over. Oh boy.
And you don't even have your gloves on.
No. Another real invasive too is this wild grapevine. See that will cover to the top of a tree, and you'll get no photosynthesis, so it literally kills the tree. It goes up to the top. So that's one, as I'm doing buckthorn, I try to pull that out there too. This would not be a good time to pull them out. The soil is so dry, you pretty much would snap them off, and then the roots would be there, and they would come back. They've really adapted very well to the northeast and the north central area of Wisconsin and Canada. This is just, they seem to thrive. The one that's called glossy buckthorn seems to like damper areas, and the one we see in this area most is called the common buckthorn, and literally it can grow in wet, dry, cold, warm. It's very, very hardy, unfortunately, and it pretty much will take over. I think they're finding in some of the wooded areas up north where there are a lot of deer, the deer are eating a lot of the saplings that are growing up, so the woods are not continuing to grow and add new growth to the woods. Okay. Unfortunately, I have not seen any munched on by deer. They seem to avoid it. I'm not sure why. Although they've said sometimes that elk or deer might eat the seeds and spread them again like every other animal would do that.
Wow, somebody should do a test on it and find out if it's poisonous or not.
Yeah, really. I've often thought it'd be an interesting project for Johnson's Wax to come up with a buckthorn herbicide. I mean, most of us seem to use a Roundup. That's a common one, and some of the nature centers would probably have other ones too, but that seems to really work. And I found occasionally I'll forget to poison a stump, and you come back another year and there are probably 20 or 30 shoots coming out of that stump. And I've noticed in some of the woods, I think over the years the city has probably cut the buckthorn, but they didn't poison them. So where there's a stump maybe 2 or 3 inches in diameter, now there's 6 or 8 that are 2 inches in diameter. They seem to grow in clumps, and they're very gnarled. I say it's like a Chinese puzzle sometimes when you get a big one, to start cutting the edge and break that away, and then finally cut the main one to pull it down a little bit.
Now, what happens if somebody like living in the city finds out that they have one growing on their property, and they should get rid of it because they don't want more of them? Mm-hmm. Do you guys come over to chop them down, or do they have to hire somebody to do that?
Well, usually, I'd be willing to come over and just see what they've got and maybe give them a little help, get them started at least. And some of the smaller ones, I just have like a hand saw that I cut them. I don't need the chainsaw, and just cut them and put herbicide on the stump, and then they'll have to dispose of it one way or another, either through the city's recyclable site, or if they've got a fire pit to use, or a fireplace or something, then you could probably do that there too. Okay. But sure, quite a while ago the Journal Times did an article and took some pictures, and I gave them my phone number, and I think I got about 15 phone calls, and a couple of people wanted me to come in and do their woods, and I said I would come at least and help them get started, show them how to do it, how to identify a buckthorn, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Now, you're basically doing this as a volunteer?
Sure.
And not even a volunteer for the city of Racine at all, just a volunteer. Because how did you get started with this?
Well, it's interesting. When I bought this house, one of the reasons I wanted to come here is I thought the woods was wonderful. It looked like the Amazon to me. It was just, then I found out pretty much it was a dead zone. There were no wildflowers or anything growing in there. And a friend of mine, Larry Gregg, said to me, "You've got buckthorn in here." And I said, "Well, what is that?" And so it went on from there. I probably spent 2 years here cutting out maybe half of the woods. And since I've done that, a lot of wildflowers have come back. And we'll find that in woods too, unless those small buckthorns take over. And they'll cover the under area of the wood so much that the wildflowers don't grow anymore. But I'm kind of on top of it here because it's not a real big area. Because that was kind of the start, and then I don't know, I used to start by cutting with a bow saw, and then someone said, "Why don't you get a chainsaw?" So I did. I'm on my 3rd chainsaw now. I've probably cut a couple of thousand of them over the years.
Wow, good for you.
And the fellow that you'll meet, Bernie Mann, who works with me at Pritchard Park, and that's a county park, which is interesting. Sanders Park is just up the block, and I quite often will go up there with my bucket of tools and such and cut away. It's interesting, I've had probably 10, 15 people confront me as I'm in the woods. "What are you wrecking this woods for? What's going on here?" So usually I had some literature, some cards that I would give the people and talk a little bit about it. There was one guy who was kind of nasty. "What are you doing here? Why are you wrecking my woods?" And I said, "I don't like woods. I want to make a prairie out of this." I said, "No, I'm just kidding." But the naturalist who lived in there, Barry, I really befriended him, and I ended up having to get permission from the state on down for Sanders Park because it's kind of a hardwood special park. And with Pritchard Park too, I worked through Jim Metzger from the county, and some of his help came over and asked me what I did and how I learned about it and that. So I have a permission slip to do that too. A couple of times I've had a policeman or a sheriff come up to me, and somebody probably called them, there's a guy in here wrecking the woods, you know. Yeah. So one of the sheriffs, after I told him about it, he said, you know, I'm going to get some of the other sheriffs to help you out sometime. So I'm still kind of looking for that group to come and help a little bit.
How did you meet some other people that were interested in doing the same thing?
I think you just kind of, you hear the word, and you know, naturalists or people that do this kind of keep their ears open to as to what's happening. I heard about Melissa Warner, who's really she started weed out in Racine, and part of that is wild garlic mustard, but she's had a lot of groups come over to Colonial Park. A number of us with chainsaws come in, and then if we can get students or someone to pull the things out after we've cut them, and then I ran into Bob Ortel, and you just, as you're cutting, like when John Dickard started this cut along the Horlick Drive there by the river, a number of people came. Greg Bach, a fellow who works for the city, and I used to, you know, Chuck Klemick, who used to be the forester for the city, and he retired, was nice to work with. I would cut a lot of things in Washington Park, and then he would come in with his crew and his chipper and run it through the chip. It's kind of nice if you can cut them down and just leave them in the woods, you know, but a lot of the parks really want them cleared out. In Sanders, I pretty much cut them down, cut the branches off so that they lay pretty flat. But certain parks like Pritchard, now they want it removed, so Bernie and I, it's easy to cut them down, but dragging them out takes a lot of work. And then every so often I'll get a hold of Jim Metzger, and he'll send his crew in there to help chip it and get rid of it now a little bit too.
What about Petrified Springs?
There are some buckthorn in there, actually near the Parkside campus, really, on Wood Road. In that area, there's lots and lots of buckthorn. That'd be a nice project for one of their natural departments to work on that a little bit. But I don't know. This area has a lot of ash, and that area seems fairly clear of buckthorn. You know, it just depends, I think, where it gets started and how it moves in that. And so, you know, everywhere I go, you know, when you're in the country or whatever, you look at the side and there's buckthorn, you know, growing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, you know, you like green, you like trees, you like whatever, but you don't realize that this literally closes out. It just smothers other trees and other wildflowers and that. So it's a terrible invasive. It's something we're not real happy that we got from Europe and Asia, but it did come here.
Now, if somebody has a bush growing in their yard, like we do, how would you go about cutting that down? Just to give some practical hints on how to do it.
Sure. Is it quite a big bush, or is it small?
It's over 6 foot tall.
Oh, it's over 6, so it's probably an inch or 2 in diameter. I have a bow saw that I would just cut that right down to the level of the soil. Then I'd put the herbicide on that. Usually they don't start getting berries until they're maybe 3 to 5, 6 years old or so.
Well, this one's got berries. So
oh, it does have berries, so that would probably be one that, I'm not sure, some people say you should, you know, put it in a dumpster where it's not going to go back into a chipped area and into trails or something. But sure, if you've got a female and you've got berries, you're going to have lots of others around her. The birds are going to eat those. Probably chipmunks or little mice will get them and drop them here and there, and all of a sudden you'll find lots of them.
So your whole house will be surrounded by weeds, which will turn into trees within a matter of 6 years.
Yeah. You know, and they are kind of nice-looking trees, really. The bark is interesting. It's, you know, it looks like a nice cherry tree or something, and the leaves are nice dark green. But when you start finding out how prolific they are and how they multiply and take over an area, like we started at the front part of Pritchard Park 2 or 3 years ago, and you literally could not see through that woods. It was between the woods and Durand Avenue. It was just so slowly we worked through that woods, and then you find a lot of amazing, big, beautiful trees growing in there. The woods we're working now at Pritchard has a lot of hickory nut trees in there, so we're usually when we're cutting, sometimes we try to look for the female trees first, and the ones that have berries, you know, get rid of them if we can.
Well, I was really surprised that the buckthorn at the very tip of the branch, is that where it gets its name, because the 2 thorns come out?
Yes. Usually at the end of a twig you'll find it. And I find after they grow sometimes they'll branch off and you'll find a thorn in between too. And
yeah, when you were holding that up before, I noticed that there's some really long thorns. I mean, they're 2-inch long thorns.
I've been impaled many times, and sometimes they get in there and they're hard to get out. I mean, they're like a needle. So sometimes they'll go through, if your leather gloves are not real thick or you've got a hole in them or something all of a sudden. So you have to be a little careful. Sometimes we tend to wear a helmet when we're working in one of the parks, and a couple of times the branches got my glasses and flipped them off.
Oh, boy.
And I looked for half an hour one time trying to find my glasses. I thought, I've got to find these, I need them. So it's a little risky. As my wife said, make sure that you're on the opposite side of the direction the tree is falling. So
How did you meet up with Harold Solberg as far as doing this project?
Well, that's kind of
with
interesting. I started volunteering over there. I'm kind of into environmental issues, so I help recycle their cardboard. So every Tuesday,
Where's that?
that's at the Restore or the Habitat area, and they get a lot of cardboard boxes, and we used to bundle it up and tie it up and then put it out for the recycling thing. Now they have a big bin that I can put it in, and so I started doing that, and talking to Harold, I knew he liked making things with wood. So, and I think he knew about buckthorn, but I took out to the woods one day with my chainsaw and cut quite a few pieces of wood for him. He likes them that there's a trunk maybe that has a branch coming out, so he thinks that when he cuts that bowl, it's going to have a real interesting pattern.
Right, and we're gonna see a little bit of that in just a little bit. So
sure,
Well,
I'm kind of happy about that. That's a use for buckthorn.
Yeah.
I hope that if people realize that it's pretty red wood in the middle, it looks like cherry.
Yep.
Maybe there'd be more use for that, and of course for fireplaces.
Fireplaces
Given
and
that the people
fires
need-
outside, you can't
Sure.
beat it.
It burns nice.
Yeah.
It's not real smoky, and it's a way to get rid of it, I think.
Well, thanks a lot, Dick, for allowing us to come over to your own personal little woods over here, and now we're looking forward to going out with you and chopping a couple trees down.
Well, you're welcome. This is fun. I hope the word gets out, because if there are people that might like to help, certainly they could contact me or someone. We're always looking for people to help drag. My wife just retired, and I was kind of kidding her maybe that she could help me a little bit, but I think she has other ideas.
There's a lot of brush over here. Wow. Hey, hi kids, Uncle Tom here. You know where I am right now? I'm over in Pritchard Park here in Racine County, actually, I found out today. We're going to meet a couple of guys who actually come into this woods, cut down trees, and they're volunteers, but they're not volunteers of any kind of an agency here in Racine or Racine County. They are doing this all by themselves. And what are they doing? This brush right back here, this is buckthorn. This is a very dangerous species, and it's killing birds and animals and trees and plants, and it's very invasive. It means it grows very fast. It's taking over. It's taken over our parks. It's taken over our woods, our forests. It's even taken over our yards. I've got some in my yard. I got to get rid of them. So I thought this would be a good documentary that we would do today to explain to you folks there on television or on the internet what a buckthorn is and a little bit of the history of it. So we're going to go meet a couple of people right now, Dick and Bernie. So come on along. Hey, are you the guys that are doing the buckthorn? You're the ones. Hey, Dick, how you doing, bro?
Real good.
Hey,
Good to see you, Tom.
And who do we have here?
I'm Bernie, man.
Bernie. Oh,
Good
it's
to meet you,
good to
Tom.
meet you. I heard you guys are going to take this guy out, and I got my lumberjack clothes on, and we're going to go into the woods and chop some trees down.
Well, we're going to take some down, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll put him to work if he wants to, Bernie. We've
Well,
been looking for help.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty old, but I know you guys are too. So hey, maybe all three of us could be 120-year-old, huh?
We just take our time.
Well, we're out at not Petrified Springs. We're out at Pritchard Park, right? And what we're going to see right here behind us is an area that these fellows over the years have cleared out. Why don't you? I'm going to just get out of your way so that the camera can see, the people can see what's going on here.
About 3 years ago, I was coming by and I noticed someone had been working in the woods here and cutting some things out, so I stopped, and it was Dick Ehlert. He explained that he was cutting out the buckthorn. And buckthorn is an invasive species that will take over the woods and kill off all the good growth in there, like the oaks, their hickory, many good varieties of trees. So Dick asked if I'd care to work with him, and it was fun working with Dick. And when we got this all cleared out, we could see across through to Durand. You could see the traffic going by on the highway. And that was really a good feeling, satisfaction to know that we had cleared out all the adult buckthorn and a lot of the younger growth also. But now you can see that it's grown up again. We can't see through to the highway anymore. It's been about 3 years, and the seeds that were, or the berries that were on the ground have developed into small trees. And of course, if you don't keep up with it, they'll just take over again.
One thing I noticed too, Bernie, when we got cutting in here, there really wasn't too much undergrowth. There were not a lot of wildflowers, not a lot of anything growing. And then when we got the buckthorn out of here, some sun came in, and I think some nice things started to grow. A few things that weren't so good. I've noticed there was some wild garlic mustard along Ohio over there, but all of a sudden the wood started to take on a little extra life, some wildflowers and nice things. But of course there's always a lot of seeds, and the birds and the mice drop the berries from the trees, and this is what we've got. So I think it's an ongoing process. Probably you'd have to keep cutting these things out for years. As Bernie said, some of the big ones we cut out were 6, 8, 10 inches across. They were really huge trees, and the county wanted us to pull the trees out of here, so that took a little work, and we're glad to have an extra hand today, Tom.
Well, this is one of the larger buckthorn that we've taken down. It's by no means the largest, but it is a big one. When we get those out of here, we feel that we've accomplished something, because the females that drop the berries are what causes the whole area to be overrun with the buckthorn.
And what is that tree that's behind you then?
Now that's a hickory. There's two, well, it's actually one base, but it branches off into two. And those are the trees that we want to keep healthy. And if the buckthorn take over, then the hickory and the oak and the other desirable ones will die out. And this particular buckthorn was very close to that hickory, and all the small growth around it. It wouldn't be long and it would be taking over.
Now I understand that one of these piles right that I'm standing next to is one of the piles that you did this year already.
That's right. In the last couple of months, right now we're July 11th, and that must have been maybe early June or possibly in May when you started that, Dick?
Okay, Tom, we're going to take this one down, and then there's a little bit bigger one in there. These are not the biggest we've had, but we usually start from the outside and kind of work in a little bit. So we'll take these down, and I'll put some herbicide on the trunk so we don't have 20 more buckthorns growing up in that. Sometimes you like to trim off a couple of these. Okay, then What we have to do when we're done with cutting one is put Roundup or some kind of herbicide on it. And basically they say you should put it around the outside, the edge where the juices flow up and down. I tend to put it over the whole tree. I don't want to take any chances that it's going to grow back again.
Yeah.
And I've got another one over here, the big one that we cut down. I could put a little herbicide on that one. You can see the difference in the color, the centers. Now this one's not quite as red. Harold Solberg tends to want to get the ones that are very red to cut bowls and little objects out of it. Then we always got to make sure that we get the little ones around it because they will tend to grow if you leave them. There are different kinds of herbicide. I use Roundup. That seems to do the job. We always start cutting toward the edge as they fall down into the open, and we haul them out in piles and the county comes and gets them. But as you look back into the woods, it's almost discouraging. I mean, when you look at the buckthorns, literally all these dark trees going up 20, 30 feet are buckthorns, and we tend to want to catch any that are growing around big trees because they'll suffocate the tree. I think they take the nutrients and the water out of the soil, but it takes a while to clear. And you can see that the park is open here now, and you'll get a lot of wildflowers coming up next year, and unfortunately you'll get a lot of little buckthorns. We're hoping we can get some of the schools or some young people to maybe come in here with a group of kids and snip and dab and keep it going. But this is a beautiful woods. There's some beautiful big old trees. As you go further in here, they're huge. People didn't even know they existed because they're so covered up by the buckthorn.
Well, the fun part is cutting the bigger ones down, but then comes the work. We have to haul it out of here, so we generally cut these bigger ones up into smaller branches and then pile them up outside, and like Dick said, then the county sends in a crew when there's enough work to do it, and they either shred them or take them to some field and burn them. We don't know what method they'll use this time, but it's just not too much of the time.
I think my wife is hoping I don't die in the woods, Bernie.
Well, how much insurance have you paid up?
Oh, nothing at all.
So if there's any 20-year-olds out there that are looking for something to do this summer, don't you look these guys up and get some good exercise and be in the outdoors.
Maybe we should put something on your program, a number they could call.
Yeah.
Typical area on the edge of a buckthorn. You'll have just 10, 20, 30 of them just growing like this. And if you let them go, you're going to have a big woods at times. So quite often you just bow saw these down rather than taking all the gas and the chainsaw. You dab them. work.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. But if we get them now, we don't have to chainsaw them down when they're 6 feet in diameter.
Hey.
Or not 6 feet, 10 inches, I mean. Okay, well, Bernie and I were in here for the long haul. As we mentioned, we've spent a couple months here and it really looks nice. And as we look back in the woods, we think this could probably take a couple years. And if we had some younger people supposedly that could come here someday and help us, we can cut down an awful lot and put herbicide in the stump. But pulling the big pieces out takes an awful lot of time. I know there are some professional people that have big wood cutting tools that come in perhaps and cut down, you know, bad species of things, and that'd be nice if we had something like that. But we sometimes have to work around the hickories and other trees that are not buckthorn. Bernie, what do you think about our future here?
Well, I agree with you. It'd be nice to have this all cleared out so it looks like a park, but it would have to be maintained because we'd hate to see it turn out like the first section that we had clear. Now 3 years later, you can't see through anymore. The young growth is really coming up. Some of it's probably 10 feet high already or more. But to preserve the good trees, the hickory and the oak, and there are a few birch.
Sure. Now over the years I've done a couple cuts in like Washington Park and Sanders Park and Colonial Park, and some of the schools have donated some time or brought a busload of kids, and that would be really handy too. I know Walden has come to Washington Park with a bunch of kids, and we're a little leery about kids cutting things and dapping herbicide on, but if they could pull some out, smaller ones after a rain, or help us out, that would really speed things up, I think.
Well, how can anybody reach you guys then if they want to help out? Maybe somebody would like to donate one of those big machines that just kind of goes in there and cuts down all this stuff.
Oh, we'd jump at that one. Sure. I could give my home phone. I'm in Mount Pleasant, Racine area. My number is 598-0350. If somebody would like to call and say they'd like to help us or they've got some ideas for us, we'd be real happy to have somebody come along.
Well, thanks a lot, you guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Bernie, it's nice meeting you, sir.
Glad to meet you, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Well, kids, I sure hope you liked that show. Boy, we met some two great people. Once again, like I said before, these guys are volunteers, and they're not volunteers of any kind of agency in Racine or in Wisconsin. They just decided to do it themselves. Of course, they have permits from the city parks and the county parks to do this kind of stuff. If you would like to join them, just give them a call, give Dick a call, and you could come out here and have some fun cutting down trees too. And if you're a younger guy, like I said before, it's going to be a good thing to do in the summertime. Going to build up those muscles for wrestling in the fall, and you'll get something accomplished and you'll feel good about it. So we're going to see you guys next time. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's going to be another Volunteers of Racine. So we'll see you. Bye-bye. Well, kids, that was part one of the Buckthorn. Now, I hope you'll stay tuned or check the listings that we'll have on television of the next part, to part two. We're going to take this ugly buckthorn plant and going to turn it into a wooden bowl. Actually, it's not going to be it's going to be Harold Solberg, a good friend of mine, over at the Habitat for Humanity Restore, one of the founders of it. So I hope you can see that. Meantime, Uncle Tom saying bye. Hope to see you soon. Take care. Yeah.